Greetings, brethren. Well, my family and I are so pleased to be here with you once again I usually say the Bath congregation in Medina. Because I do remember my first visit here was in Bath, and what a lovely visit it was. And I must say also that coming here is such a delight. You know, the location of this site, just tucked in to the hills in this lovely, vegetative or, a green area. It's so filled with nature. It's so appropriate for the Sabbath, to come into an environment such as this and to know we are just all by ourselves here in the hills, for worship. And we're really, really happy to be able to share with you today and to be visiting from Toronto. We drove in last night and, it was raining all the way. Well, I'd say 2/3 of the way. And so we took our time, got here, and of course, thank God for the safe journey. My daughter Marika was the champion because while we were falling asleep, she was up and doing a great job. And so we really are very happy for that. We're just also all coming back from the feast. How was it? Good? Oh yeah, it was good for us too. I spent the feast, part of it in Midland, Ontario, where we had a feast site for the church. That site is primarily the Toronto congregation, but we do have a few persons coming in to visit from there, from far parts of Canada, and coming there. So we had a very, very wonderful, delightful Feast of Tabernacles. I had the opportunity to spend the last 2 days of the feast in Jamaica, and that too was very, always delightful to go to Ocherius, where that particular feast site is. It's just set right by a waterfall, and it's just depicting much of what the Feast of Tabernacles represents. So when you go there, it's always great to enjoy that. And, got back here. The feast brought us to a high. I'm sure we all went to the feast with this great expectation. Excuse me. We look forward to it. It's a culmination of the holy calendar. We start with the Passover, and then we go through the feasts of unleavened bread and the feast of Pentecost, and come into trumpets and into the atonement, and then tabernacles in the last great day. And that is the highlight. When we get away from it all, we spend time together like family. The feast is unlike the Sabbath in the sense that on the Sabbath we come and we see each other for a few hours, but we go away to our respective homes. At the feast, we actually live together as family. We get to know each other better. And sometimes we don't even like what we learn about each other when we go to the feast. It sometimes happens. But one of the beautiful things about the feast is that it is God's dwelling. It represents God's dwelling. And so what it pictures is that we have left our homes, our normal, regular abode, and we've gone to the dwelling of God to live with Him. It's like a person who might have grown up and you are now living on your own, and you left your parents' home, and you're probably living some many, many miles away, and there's this nostalgic feeling of remembering the days of your childhood when you were growing up with parents and all the wonderful experiences, and it comes back, and you're longing. There's a deep feeling that you want to go home to spend some time with mom and dad. And so you got there. And you're in home, and you're reminiscing on all the great things that used to happen. There's a feeling you get when you get to the Feast of Tabernacles that this is really where I belong. Where I live is where I'm now living, but this is where I was nurtured. This is where I grew up. This is where I was shaped and molded, and this is where I made my mistakes and I was corrected, and now I've become a person. And so when I get back there, it means so much to me. And that is really such a great experience, to be at the feast. But alas, when we leave the feast and we get back into our regular environments, so many things can happen. Because it's a kind of a natural human journey or experience that after we get to a high, we get to a point of excitement, a point when we're celebrating. And the celebration is kind of over, that we get back into this little low. And feelings of restlessness, feelings of it's over, feelings of depression can set in. In fact, even in the world's holidays, one of the experiences that people have with the holidays, like the Christmas holidays and so on, is that some kind of a depression sets in. It's probably for another reason, because sometimes that season, there are so many expectations that people are buying a lot and enjoying a lot, and individuals who are not feeling the experience of that particular season, they sort of feel left out and they feel lonely, and so it's another kind of an experience. But the psychological impact of getting on a high and then getting back to the normal, phase of life can bring about some change in the way that we feel. That happens even more when coupled, like an experience we had in Toronto just over the past week, where one of our brothers and his wife, who were with us throughout the feast, we had such a wonderful time. And we came back, and the first Sabbath service after the feast was one in which we had a marriage seminar. We were dealing with the issue of dealing with conflicts in marriage. I used the sermon of the day to deal with the issue of dealing with conflicts in marriage and the family. And then we had a breakout, the kind of a workshop, in which there were 3 couples at varying age groups and experiences, a nice blend, that were asked to sit in, and so they were interviewed, and very nicely moderated by Adrian Davis, and the questions were posed to them about, how they met, questions like, did they, has their marriages worked out the way they thought it would? What are some of the issues in marriage that they're experiencing they never did expect? How do they manage to solve the issues, the conflicts? And particularly Patrick Bastian, who is now on your prayer list here because he's now in the hospital. He suffered from a major stroke. He's been in a coma for the past week. Particularly Patrick and his wife, Davina, were so hilarious with things they were saying. It was such they really carried it. Everyone was good, but they really carried the day with their experiences. They were the oldest of the couples that were there. So they have a little more to share. And, they were using terms like, we are like night and day, talking about the differences between husband and wife and saying how different we are and what I like and what he doesn't like. And they were going through a lot, but they were having fun sharing with us. And then a little later on, Davina would come out and say, well, when we say night and day, I want you to know who is night and who is day. And so she pointed to Patrick and said, he is the night and I'm the day. It was just wonderful. We enjoyed it. Within a few hours of Patrick and Davina departing on the Sabbath, we got a call from Davina. They were at dinner, and somehow Patrick lifted up the cutlery at dinner, and it fell. And so he tried to get it again, and it fell. And this happened like about 4 or 5 times. And he got up, probably just went maybe to the restroom and came back and, okay, are you okay now? Yeah, I'm okay. And he sat there, and then he just tumbled over. And that was it. The doctors came in and all of what happened, and Patrick is still in a coma. There was a vessel, an aneurysm is it called? It was burst in the head, and the clot and the damage, and we don't know, but we've been praying. But when things like this set in, consider Davina, consider the family after coming from the feast. How this must be a kind of a letdown. How is it that someone who was so faithful and so committed to God, so committed to the church, doing everything he can? Patrick was recently appointed to the board of the Canadian board of the Church of God International and serving there. So he's a man who is not only serving in the church in Toronto, but on the national board and doing so many things. And the question is, did God know that this was going to happen? And if he did, could he have prevented it? And if he didn't, what must we learn from it? These are questions that come to mind. And it brings us to a point where we see how life can take turns with us. Sickness and death is not of God. The wages of sin is death. And because of man's sin, we are still under the weight of that human nature that the enemy has planted in us, which although we have God's Spirit, we still are struggling. The Apostle Paul would say, the things I want to do, I find myself not doing them. And the things I don't want to do, I find myself doing them. Oh, wretched man that I am. How can I explain this? The conflict, the dilemma. And so it is the natural development that is taking place. I thought today we should talk a little bit about how is it that we get from a spiritual high to a spiritual low? How is it that faithful Christians fall away? How is it that people that mean well, they're doing well, they really are committed, there's no doubt about it, don't second guess them, but somehow you don't see them turning up to services a couple of weeks, and you called, say, well, I wasn't feeling so well, but I'll see you next Sabbath. All right. So they struggled and they came out the following Sabbath and he said, okay, it's over. But then they're not as regular as it used to be. Something is not right. Something is going on. We don't know what. But something is not right. And little by little, there are excuses and there are issues and they're explaining and can't quite get to it. Can't quite get to it. What is happening? I really want to look at this topic of how we fall from a spiritual high to a spiritual low. And I prepared to do it. I actually did some preparations. And I must tell you what happened. You know, I speak from a computer. And mainly because of my eyes. You know, I like to blow up my print and so on, and I can easily get to my Bible and so on. So, we were leaving Toronto, and my daughter and my wife were in Niagara Falls, and we were to meet them there, and Haniel, my grandson, and I were at the house. We were to leave to be there. So we got out of the house, and we had our little luggage and so on, and he was trying to close the door, and he was having a little difficulty. So I said, okay, you come, hold the elevator, I'll close the door. And so I had my computer in my hand with my sermon, and I rested it on a little ledge, and I went and I closed the door, but because he was holding the computer, and he was holding the elevator, and I know other people are waiting on the elevator, I quickly closed, and I boop, in the elevator, went down, we got in the car, we drove. When I was pretty much entering, the United States, out of Canada, I got a call from the security at our building. Did you leave a computer? A computer? Hold on. Yeah. My sermon! Oh my goodness! So, of course, I think that all things work together for good to them. Love the Lord. I'm not complaining, but I want us to take a look, if we may, at 1 Kings 18. And I want us to take a look at this because here is a man, Elijah, a faithful man of God, who is beyond a doubt a giant in the faith. You understand the various circumstances of Elijah's life. In fact, when Elijah was to give up, he was aged in the ministry, and Elisha was there. It was Elijah's ministry that was handed over to Elisha because he was this great prophet and great man of God. In fact, many misunderstand the scripture which says that Elijah was caught up into the heavens and believe that Elijah is now in heaven. And that's a topic on its own, that neither Elijah nor Enoch are in heaven. The Bible clearly proves that and shows that, but that's not the topic for today. It's something that, is worthwhile doing. But Elijah was a defender of God. He was a fighter. He was a bold. You talk about a Christian soldier. You talk about a man who faces the enemy. This was the man. He was such a confident person. Extremely confident. You look in verse 20 of 1 Kings 18. And you see here that there is going to be a kind of showdown. Because there is a contending that Ahab, who was ruling over the nation, Israel, was creating an impression that the prophets of Baal were the people that had the miraculous powers. That the god, Baals, that they were the ones who were to be worshipped. And there was a kind of a showdown to say, who is the living God? Who must we worship? To whom should we bow down? In whom must we express our faith? So here comes a big showdown. I can imagine how everyone was excited to see this, how it is going to work out. Because here is a king versus an ordinary prophet. Ordinary in their eyes. It says in verse 20, so Ahab sent for all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets on Mount Carmel. And Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? They had not had their minds made up. Because they heard about Israel's God, but over a period of time, somehow the shine begins to rub off. Over generations of poor leadership, you find that things are not the same as they were. And there was a time of reckoning that had come at hand. How long will you falter between opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. What does that say to you? They're only watching to see. They want to find out who is God. So they didn't go and say, yes, we must follow Yahweh. No, that's not what they did. They were just silent. Even though he said, if Yahweh is God, then let's follow him. They didn't even respond to that. Which means they were not convinced about it. Verse 22. Then Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now, as we go down deeper into this passage, you're going to see how that particular view that Elijah had was not correct. That he was the only prophet, or the only one, so to speak, that God had. Because he made that statement later. But that's how he felt. And sometimes we ourselves feel that way. Sometimes you are in a home where your family is not necessarily in the church. You are the only person. You feel like a stranger. They ridicule you. Why do you have to go do this? Imagine we are still trying to pay the bills and you're going to take time off to go stay in a hotel for 8 days. What heart do you have? You are seen as kind of a liability to the family because of your faith. You're not really warmed up to. Others are leaving out and they're going to church and maybe 4 or 5 are gone. When you are leaving, it's you alone. Now that doesn't happen to all of us, but it does happen to many persons in the church where they find themselves as being lonely. And so it could sometimes occur to them. There's a gentleman who visited us all the way from Newfoundland, and he came to the Feast of Tabernacles, he and his wife. And he said he lives in a district that is just a strong Catholic city, township. He has never seen another person who belongs to the Church of God. I'm not speaking about Church of God International. I'm just talking about the Church of God. Because the Church of God, let's always remember this. We do not believe the Church of God International or United Church of God or all the various churches of God. We believe that you know God's people when they have the Spirit of God. And we believe that God gives His Spirit to them that obey Him. We believe that it is God who calls people, and he calls them through the gospel. One must hear the gospel and believe it to be saved. So we believe that there are some fundamentals to Christianity. And when those fundamentals are absent, it means that that person is not yet called. Are they condemned? No. They will have an opportunity for salvation. But God calls in a particular order. The first fruits, then when he comes, those who are his. But this couple came there and they were just alone in a whole city, and they're the only people. Sometimes you can say, I'm the only person that God has. And this is how Elijah felt. Verse 23. Yeah, so he says, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. So it's me alone, it's 450 of them. Verse 23. Therefore, let them give us 2 bulls, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves. Cut it in pieces, and lay it on wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under it. Equal. We're trying to prove who is God. So you are getting the same chance as I am getting. The playing field is going to be balanced. Verse 24. Then you call on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. I think that's a decent arrangement. I think that's fair. I think you want to know who is God? Let us not sit down and argue. Let's demonstrate it. And that's what he's doing. He is now giving tangible proof that the Lord is God. So all the people answered him and said, it is well spoken. That means, that's fair. We are with you. That sounds okay. Verse 25. Now Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 bull for yourselves. He's not choosing lest they should say that there was something about the bull that he chose, or find some excuse. You choose which one. I'll take the other. It's like when Abraham and Lot, he says, if you'll take the left, I'll take the right. Choose 1 for yourselves and prepare it first. I will give you first priority. Lest you think that I have done something and it got in your way. It's all clear. There are no obstacles. You go ahead. You take the first place. For you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it, because it is your God who must put the fire. That is the point. That is the test. So they took the bull, verse 26, so they took the bull which was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice. No one answered. Then they leaped about the altar which they had made. They were doing all kinds of things, around the altar, trying to persuade Baal to do what they would wish for him to do, to prove. Verse 27. And so it was at noon that Elisha mocked them. Look at this man. Look at the mood he is in. Elisha is having fun. He's mocking them. Look at what he's saying to them. Cry aloud, for he is a God. I can imagine how he was having a great time there. Either he's meditating or he's busy. I mean, he's really ridiculing them. This is a man with confidence. He's sure that when it comes to the time for his God to act, that they are going to see a difference. Or he is on a journey. Or perhaps he's sleeping and must be awakened. Oh my goodness. What a way he was ridiculing them. So they cried aloud and cut themselves, as was their custom, trying to invoke and to persuade their God. They cut themselves with knives and lances until the blood gushed out on them. And when midday was past, they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. It's our Bible we're reading. Isn't this a wonderful story? I like these stories. I like stories that puts us on the line to prove our God. To say, and you know, what could have given Elijah this faith and this confidence? Is because Elijah was walking closely with God. It's because Elijah has proven God. He knows God. Sometimes for many people, God is just an idea. God is just a concept. God is just, we've heard about it. God is something that we say, well, it sounds okay. But for Elijah, I know him. I have walked with him. I have proven him. I can be confident in him. I can place my stakes upon him. Because I know when it comes to time for him to deliver, that he will. Verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, come near me. So all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be our name. Then with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood and said, fill 4 water pots with water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. Now, wow, that is going to an extreme. It's okay, you have the wood, you have the bull, you don't have any fire. But Elisha, you're not going to throw water on it? The very opposite of fire? This is a demonstration of faith. This is a man who believes in his God. He goes on. Then he said, do it a second time. So they filled up the vessels. They poured it on. And it was wet. Do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. Oh, I would have loved to be there. I think I would have been enjoying this. Either this man is crazy, he's out of his mind, or he knows something the rest of them did not know. He knew God. When you know God, you can have faith. When you know God, it matters not how difficult times are. What Elijah was doing was making it even more difficult to show the power of God. Because God is a God of the impossible. God delights in doing the things that men consider impossible to prove himself. And Elijah understood God. So it's not that Elijah was really in a mood of mocking. He was really in a very confident mood. He was in a mood to prove his God, to show to others who God really is. Maybe Elijah was saying to himself that, you know what? Maybe if I should just allow the wood to be there and that the bull was on it and to pray and the fire comes down, some person may cynically say, oh, by the time you were doing it, the sun became hotter. And so it was the sun that caught the wood of fire. It's not any God that did it. He wanted to eliminate every possible excuse so that God's name could be glorified. Do it the third time. And they did it the third time. So the water ran all around the altar. And he also filled the trench with water. Verse 36. And it came to pass, at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. That's an important statement. Many times, you see, if Elijah was doing this to get some kind of a personal recognition, many times the motive is what matters when we are working with God. If we're doing it to show off and to show that, well, you know, I'm a better Christian than you, and it's all about me, that's wrong. It was important for this to be written that he was following God's instructions in all of what he was doing. I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord. This is about God, not about Elijah. That they may know that you, Yahweh, is God. That you have turned their hearts. That you may turn their hearts back to you again. Verse 38, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. Now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Sometimes, brethren, when we are going through our trials, God is not pleased when all we can do is to complain. God is not pleased when all we can do is to be worried and to be in this state of despair and lacking in faith. When issues and challenges come up in our lives, they present opportunities in the life of the believer. Problems are opportunities. Problems are the way God presents an opportunity for us to prove him. For us to prove to him our faith, our commitment. And therefore, for the church, there are no problems. It's not a problem. What I must look into is say, what is God saying to me through this? Why is this happening? The Lord orders the footsteps of them that fear him. What is God saying to me? Is God drawing me a little closer to him? Is God using me so that I may demonstrate faith that many people may say, now we believe that this is God? That's what happened here. They never did believe until Elijah could have done something to prove the power of God. The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God, they said. And Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them there. Wow. Wow. I'm going to ask you now to just go down with me into chapter 19 of the same Kings. There, chapter 19. Because this is a very interesting thing, and this is where I'm showing you. What we're looking at is a man who was at the peak. He was on the mountaintop of the faith. You don't want a person who is more confident about God, a person who knows God, a person who you would say Elijah is an unshakable man of God. How do strong Christians fall? How do people who are spiritually at the peak of the faith find themselves at the bottom? In chapter 19, brothers, sisters, it says here, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. Elijah did all the things, including bringing down rain. And he went to Jezebel, Ahab, and told her also how he had executed the prophets with the sword. Because evidently Ahab himself might have believed, having witnessed it. And so he has now gone, thinking that saying this to Jezebel, Jezebel will say, what? No. Then we have to think again. If Elijah could do this, Elijah's God must be God. But no, that's not how she responded. Verse 2 tells us how she responded. It says, then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more so also, if I do not make you your life as a life of one of them by tomorrow, about this time. She's now threatening Elijah. She said, in the same way you have killed my prophets, by this time tomorrow, I am going to kill you. And when he saw that is Elijah, he arose and ran for his life. Hold on. What's going on here? Should he not turn around and said, I dare Jezebel to stand in front of me in the way the Lord had brought down fire to consume the sacrifice. I'll pray the Lord to consume her. Something has happened. Wow, let's read it. He ran for his life and went to Bathsheba, which belonged to Judea, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die. Oh my goodness. How could he get into this state? It is enough now. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. This man has lost. He has been shocked by a message. He has been given a threat by Jezebel. And he feels helpless. Brethren, what is it that could have caused Elijah, the man we just described, the man you just saw, doing all these things, all these miracles, speaking, chanting, ridiculing, proving his God? How could it be that this man can now fall in the state of depression to the point where it's almost suicidal? He wants to lose his life. Verse 5, then he lay and slept under a broom tree. We'll get to that. I want us to talk a little bit about how he got to that state. And here are some reasons which we can think about. One, it is very hard for us to believe, after we have done so much for God, that God would do this to us. It's like you have a good friend, and you have made so many sacrifices. You denied yourself so many things. When you speak about your friend, you have spoken so well. And now, you heard that your friend is allowing your enemy to come against you? How could God do this? Something is wrong. Where could she get that power from? Already, there was a shock. He did not expect that. He expected, after doing all of this great work, that both Ahab and Jezebel would give up. But it didn't work. And so he was disappointed. Where did this disappointment come from? It came because of his expectations. When we place our expectations at a high and a level, where we are expecting, I'm qualified, so I should get the job. And after all, I was here and now you're promoting this person over me in the job, and I'm the one who trained this person? My expectation was that I should get the job because I trained him. How come he's being promoted over me? Expectations that we have for our spouses, for our families, for our jobs, for our school, for the church. Do you have expectations here that are not being filled, not being met in the church? You think things should be going some way and it's not going that way and you're not so happy? Yeah, it happens. But when these things happen, we have to understand what is happening. God is testing us. And so, the expectation has now caused him to run into disappointment. And the disappointment now caused him to fall into a depression. And the depression now caused him to fall into the place where he feels like giving up his life. Look, I'm no better than my fathers. Look at how much I've done. He has now turned on himself. He's no longer looking at God. He's looking at himself. Look at how much I've done. I am no better than my fathers. That's how he's now looking at himself. Before, he was looking all at God. He has now become the center of his life. And these are some of the challenges that we face. These are some of the challenges that can face us as we come back from the feast. And we come and we have had a wonderful, great time, and then we're no longer getting up in the morning as we used to and getting out there and meeting with brethren and having the love breakfast, and I now have to cook my breakfast myself. And someone was cooking my breakfast every morning for the last 8 days. How is that? When I came back, my room was made up. Now I have to go and make up my own room. It may not be just that, but it may be many other things. Maybe many other things. It may be that now that you come home, you are back into an environment where things are not so pleasant. It can be many, many things. May I invite you to learn the lessons of this great man of God. The Bible said Elijah was a man just like us. So you and I are no different. We can get and have the wonderful experiences and wonderful time with God, but there are times when we can get into a low. When the low comes, the lesson to learn here is to understand that God is providing you with an opportunity to draw closer to Him. Do not use it to go further from God. Use it to build up your faith. Verse 5 says, "Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, 'Arise and eat.'" Oh, arise and eat? You know what was one of Elijah's problems? He was there and he probably was so absorbed in doing the work of God and so on, he was neglecting himself. Many times why we fall in depression, we are neglecting ourselves. You may say, "Oh, you just said that you ought not to focus on myself, and now you are saying," no. God wants us to be balanced. Feeding our bodies, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families, taking care of our jobs, taking care of all the things are important to God. That's part of our Christian responsibility. What he doesn't want us to do is to become self-centered, rather than focusing on God. So even when we feed ourselves, we understand that it is God who is providing for us. Because evidently, there was a problem where Elijah was just burnt out. This is evidently one of the issues. It may not be the only issue. But all the angel said to him is, arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked and coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate. This is not an invitation for us to go and overeat. And say, well, you see, God told Elijah to get up and eat. So I'm eating. What is wrong? What do you say? No. It's all a balance. It's all a balance. And so it goes on. So he arose and he drank and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into a cave and spent night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And from here you can read the rest of the story for yourself by showing how the restoration, he was restored. Brethren, the Christian walk and the Christian journey has its hills, has its valleys. You and I are invited by God. Never be disappointed. Never give up. Never find yourself worrying and being of a double mind and in a quandary and in a state of worry or depression. All things work together for good to them that love the Lord. No matter what anyone says about you or against you, always do it. Look at it in the perspective. There's a little saying, no one stones a barren tree. When people are throwing darts at you, no one stones a barren tree. They stone the tree only when there are fruits, something that they want. When people are getting at you, there's something about you. As long as you're living God's way, there's something about you that is causing them to do it. Let it be that the fruit of God's Spirit is what they are jealous about. They're seeing how you are loved. They're seeing how you are always happy. They're seeing how things are going. And for that reason, you can be the victor in the end. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Amen.